Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We're all about getting to the heart of complex topics and, helping you understand them quickly without getting bogged down in too much detail. Today, we're going to be diving into something called the job spectrum.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sounds kind of complicated at first, but hopefully by the end of this deep dive, we can make it a little bit clearer for you.
Exactly. So, you're in the right place if you've ever felt overwhelmed trying to grasp some of these big ideas. Our mission today is to really break down the job spectrum for you.
We want to explore how it actually works.
Yeah.
The nuts and bolts of the thing.
Right, like where does the money come from? Because that's always a big question, right?
It is. And ultimately, why should anyone care about this? How could it affect their life?
So, to give you a little bit of background, the job spectrum is all about this idea of manufacturing data with meaning.
It's a catchy phrase, right?
Yeah, it kind of grabs your attention. And it pulls from these fascinating areas like, patterns in art, baseball statistics, and even some pretty complex mathematical principles.
You've got things like fractals, the Mandelbrot set, the Golda ratio, the Fibonacci sequence. It's a pretty wild mix of ideas.
So, we've been digging into a bunch of materials that talk about the job spectrum, and we're going to try to pull out the most important parts for you today.
Yeah, it's all about making sense of it all. So maybe a good starting point would be to look at what problem the job spectrum is actually trying to solve.
Right, like what's the big issue here?
Exactly.
Well, one of the thinkers we've been reading, Andrew McAfee from MIT, he talks about how the droids are taking our jobs.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty striking way to put it.
Yeah, it really gets your attention.
Wow.
And what he means is that, with all this automation and technology advancing so rapidly, there are going to be fewer and fewer traditional jobs available.
And that's a concern that a lot of people have, right?
Absolutely. So the job spectrum presents itself as kind of like a solution to this problem, but it's not just about finding new jobs for people. It's more about creating a whole new system for how people can be compensated for their work or their contributions, even if those contributions don't look like a traditional job.
Right, so it's kind of like a fundamental shift in how we think about work and value.
Yeah, exactly. And they use this term keystone to describe it, like it's this crucial piece that holds everything together.
I see.
The idea is to create a system that's fairer, more creative, and where everyone can participate in the economy in a meaningful way.
And they specifically talk about putting humanity to work, with that emphasis on the word work. So what does that actually look like in practice? How does this job spectrum thing actually work?
Right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. So from what we've gathered, it uses something called a self-similar survey.
Self-similar survey. Okay, that's a new one.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but basically you can think of it like the Nielsen ratings. You know how they track what people are watching on TV?
Oh, yeah.
Well, instead of TV shows, this survey focuses on different types of jobs, and these jobs are organized into 21 starter guilds based on existing job classifications.
So these are categories like healthcare, technology, education, that sort of thing.
Exactly, things like office administration, skilled trades, farming, all the different areas of work you can think of.
So it's using a framework that people are already familiar with.
Right, exactly. So then here's where it gets interesting. They've incorporated this shared labor aspect. Basically, participants are divided into groups based on their zodiac sign.
Wait, there's zodiacs, not like astrology?
Yeah, you heard that right. And it's not just any zodiac sign. It's based on something called triplicities, which are groups of signs that share certain elements: fire, earth, air, and water.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
So each group participates in the survey only 3 times a year when the sun is in their specific astrological house. So if you're in the fire sign group, for example, you would participate during certain months of the year.
And what does participating actually involve?
It's a 30-day process that happens every 90 days. And during that time, you're basically ranking the importance, skill level, and physical ease of 20 out of the 21 starter guilds.
20 out of 21.
Yeah.
So you don't rank your own guild.
Exactly. If you're in, say, the tech guild, you wouldn't be ranking tech jobs, you'd be ranking the other 20.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're offering your perspective on the broader job market, not just your own little niche.
Right, and this is where the shared revenue part comes in. Even though you're only actively surveying 3 times a year, you actually get paid 12 times a year.
Oh, wow. So the work you put in, it keeps generating value for you throughout the year.
Yeah, it's like your contribution is part of a larger system that's constantly working. And they talk about this idea of stickiness, the things that keep people engaged and coming back.
I can see how that would be appealing, the novelty of it, the potential to earn.
It's definitely a different way of thinking about work and income. And one of the sources we looked at even compares it to a bacterium's flagellum, this little tail that helps it move forward.
Huh. It's a strange analogy.
Yeah, but it kind of makes sense in a way. Like this system has this unique feature that keeps it moving and growing.
Okay, I get it. So people participate by ranking jobs a few times a year, and they get paid monthly. But where does the money actually come from to pay them? How does the job spectrum make money?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, it's got to come from somewhere.
So it looks like they have multiple revenue streams. First off, there's advertising. Businesses can pay to place ads around the survey questions.
Like while you're taking the survey, you might see ads for different products or services.
Yeah, and it could be anything from big corporations to small businesses. Even the guilds themselves could advertise.
Interesting. So that's one stream. What else?
Then there's a one-time fee that participants pay when they join the job spectrum. It's called the participant starter fee, and it's $144.
So it's like an initial investment to be part of the system.
Exactly. And then they also plan to sell something called manufactured data subscriptions. So they'll be releasing some of the survey data publicly each month, but if companies want more detailed data, they'll have to pay for a subscription.
Ah, so it's like they're creating valuable data that businesses would be willing to pay for. Clever.
Right. And the last revenue stream is accrued interest. This is basically interest earned on the money that participants have in the job spectrum accounts, before they withdraw it.
Oh, so it's like having a little savings account within the system.
Yeah, exactly. So they've got a few different ways of bringing money in. Now, how does it get distributed back to the participants? We've seen some mention of a unique system based on the golden ratio.
Yeah, the golden ratio, it pops up in some unexpected places.
Right, and this is one of them. So a portion of the advertising revenue is divided according to the golden ratio. About 62% goes into a monthly purse that's distributed to the participants, and the rest goes towards covering the job spectrum's operating costs and development.
Okay, so it's like a profit-sharing model, but based on this mathematical principle.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And another thing they emphasize is that 40% of all the revenue they generate goes towards taxes and fees up front.
Oh, so the money participants receive is essentially after tax.
Exactly. They call it a tax-paying machine, which is kind of a funny way to put it, but it does simplify things for the individuals involved.
Yeah, no more figuring out complicated tax forms. That's the definite plus.
Right. And one of the analogies they use is how prize money is distributed in golf tournaments.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So just like how a golfer's performance determines how much of the prize money they get, the collective input of the participants through their rankings influences how that monthly purse is distributed.
So the more people participate and contribute, the bigger the pot of money, and everyone benefits.
Exactly. It's a system designed to reward collective effort.
So we've talked about how it works, where the money comes from, but let's get down to brass tacks here. What's in it for the average person? Why should they care about the job spectrum?
That's the big question, right? What are the benefits?
Exactly.
Well, the main selling point is that you could potentially earn income 12 times a year by only doing those surveys 3 times a year.
So part-time effort for potentially a full year's worth of income.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's all about creating new avenues for people to generate income, especially as the nature of work continues to evolve.
And they talk about redefining what work and labor even mean in today's world.
Right, because it's not just about clocking in and out at a traditional job anymore. There are all these other ways to contribute and create value.
And one of the things that really stood out to me was the potential for collective impact. Since participants are essentially directing advertising revenue through their rankings, they could collectively choose to support professions that they feel are undervalued or underpaid.
That's a pretty powerful idea.
Right. Like, let's say people really value the work that bloggers do or hospice nurses. They could, in a way, vote with their rankings to drive more financial support towards those professions.
And they talk about this being a way to inject what they call consciousness into the way we as a society do business.
Wow, that's a big statement.
It is. But it's basically about giving people more control over where their money goes and how the economy functions.
And it's not just about earning money. It's also about being part of something bigger. They talk about the job spectrum being a participant-owned co-op media channel.
Yeah, so it's not just a company. It's more like a community of people working together.
That's pretty cool.
We also see the potential for the job spectrum to create something called an index of opportunities.
An index of opportunities. What's that?
It's like a real-time snapshot of how different professions are being valued by the participants.
Yeah,
It could be a really useful tool for people who are trying to figure out what career paths to pursue.
I see. So it could help people make more informed decisions about their future.
Exactly. And it all comes back to this idea of the job spectrum being a keystone for a better future.
Okay, but how do they define a better future?
Well, they talk about creating a world that's kinder, gentler, more intelligent, and more focused on solving the real problems we face.
Those are some pretty lofty goals.
They are.
Yeah.
And they appeal to this desire that many people have to be part of something meaningful, to make a difference.
And they really hit home this idea that reality needs a redesign.
Right, like things aren't working the way they should be, and we need to find new solutions. And they see the job spectrum as kind of like a flagellum for society, helping us move in a better direction.
Okay, I'm starting to get the whole flagellum thing now.
Good, good. So if someone's interested in getting involved, it seems like the barrier to entry is pretty low, just that one-time fee of $144.
And then your contribution is basically your time, ranking those jobs during your designated period.
Right. And in return, you have the potential to earn a share of the revenue that's generated.
It's like a new kind of economy, almost.
It is. And it's important to note that the participants are absolutely essential to the whole thing working.
Without the people, there's no data, no revenue, no system.
Exactly. And one source even compares the participants to the algorithms that power platforms like Google. They're the ones who are ranking the products, but in this case, the products are those job guilds.
So the collective wisdom of the crowd is what drives the whole thing. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a system that relies on the input of a diverse group of people to function effectively.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Beyond these immediate benefits for individuals, what's the bigger picture? What's the potential impact of the job spectrum on a larger scale?
Right, let's zoom out a bit. Well, one thing they highlight is the sheer amount of data that would be generated by these ongoing surveys.
Data is valuable these days.
It is, and they suggest that this data could be used to create all sorts of insights, potentially visualize using things like Miller indices and three-dimensional graphs.
Okay, now you're losing me a bit with the technical jargon.
Fair enough, fair enough. But the point is, this data could be really valuable for businesses, economists, and policymakers, anyone who wants to understand how people perceive different jobs and how the workforce is evolving.
So it's like a window into the future of work, almost.
Yeah, exactly. And they believe that the job spectrum has the potential to influence economies, not just locally, but globally.
So it's not just about individual people earning money. It's about reshaping the whole system.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Can we do a quick recap of the key takeaways from our deep dive into the job spectrum?
Absolutely. So it's presented as this innovative system that's designed to adapt to the changing nature of work.
And it aims to generate income through advertising, selling data subscriptions, and potentially even accrued interest.
Right. And the core value proposition for participants is this model of shared labor and shared revenue, where you contribute your time and insights, and you potentially benefit from the collective success of the system.
And hopefully we've managed to demystify some of the jargon and explain how the job spectrum works in a way that's easy to understand.
That was our goal.
And it's a pretty fascinating concept, even if some of the details are still a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah, it definitely raises a lot of questions. So for our listeners out there, I'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. How might a system like this, that's built on collective input and draws inspiration from these natural patterns, change how we view the value of different kinds of work and how we compensate people for those contributions?
A whole different way of thinking about the economy.
It is. And it all comes back to this idea of manufacturing data with meaning. Could this be a path towards a more conscious and equitable economy? Something to ponder, for sure.
Definitely something to think about.